It was supposed to be just another routine hearing. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs, papers shuffled, and the judge's gavel echoed as people filed into their seats. I sat quietly near the front row, dressed in a navy blue blazer, crisp white shirt, and khaki slacks. I blended in, by choice. Most had no clue who I really was, and I preferred it that way. I wasn't on trial. I wasn't even involved in the case. I was simply there to observe proceedings involving my younger brother, Marcus, who had been unfairly cited during a traffic stop. I promised him I'd be there, calm, silent, and watching everything. That plan went south. The second officer, Warren, entered the courtroom. Tall, broad-shouldered, and clearly agitated, he marched in like he owned the place. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. I could see the flicker of recognition, and something else. Contempt? Resentment? I sat still. Made no expression. But he didn't like that. "What are you looking at?" he barked, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few heads turned. I said nothing. I simply blinked, still seated, arms folded calmly over my lap. He took a step closer. "You got something to say to me?" The judge was still in chambers. No one intervened. I stood slowly, deliberately. "I'm just here for my brother," I said evenly. "You don't belong here," he snapped. That's when he shoved me. Hard. I took a step back, not from the force, but out of disbelief. The courtroom fell silent. One woman gasped. A few officers in the corner froze, unsure whether to step in. That's when everything changed. I reached slowly into my inside blazer pocket, and pulled out my military ID. The badge caught the light. Everyone saw the words, United States Navy SEAL. Active. Cleared. Decorated. And now, everyone waited to see what would happen next. The room held its breath. Officer Warren's smirk evaporated the instant his eyes caught the shine of my badge. His face paled slightly, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. "That's supposed to scare me," he said, louder now, trying to sound tough. "I don't care who you are, this is my courtroom." His courtroom? The bailiff stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable, but hesitated. A few other officers near the side wall whispered, unsure whether to intervene or let things unfold. I kept my voice calm and low. "You assaulted an active-duty special operations officer, inside a courtroom, in front of witnesses. You might want to think real hard before you take another step." The temperature in the room dropped. No one moved. I could feel the adrenaline rise in my chest, but I didn't let it show. Years of training taught me how to stay composed under pressure. This wasn't Fallujah. It was worse in a way. Because this was supposed to be home. Warren's eyes darted around. He was looking for someone to back him up. But the people around him weren't budging. Even the court clerk had stood halfway out of her seat, uncertain. Then came the voice that broke the standoff. "Mr. Warren, step back." It was the judge. He had entered the room quietly, unnoticed amid the tension. Now he stood at the bench, robes flowing, a sharp gaze fixed directly on the officer. Warren clenched his jaw but didn't move. "I said step back, officer," the judge repeated, more forcefully this time. Finally, Warren took a single step backward. The judge turned to me. "Sir, may I ask your name and your purpose in court today?" I took a breath. "Chief Petty Officer Grant Barlow. I'm here as a silent witness for my brother Marcus Barlow, who's being tried for resisting an arrest that never should have happened." The judge raised his eyebrows slightly. "Your Navy?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Active duty?" "SEAL Team 5. The courtroom shifted again, this time with quiet awe. The judge nodded slowly, as if reassessing the entire situation. Then he turned back to Officer Warren. "We'll be taking a very close look at your conduct, officer," the judge said coldly. "You may have just made a serious mistake." Warren didn't respond. But I saw it in his eyes. He knew. The judge motioned for the clerk to proceed, and the hearing officially began, but the energy in the courtroom had shifted entirely. Marcus, my brother, sat a few rows behind me, watching with wide eyes. He knew I was coming to support him, but I hadn't told him everything. I never liked throwing around my credentials unless I absolutely had to. Today, unfortunately, I had to. The prosecutor stood and began reading the citation against Marcus, failure to comply during a lawful traffic stop. But now, even she sounded hesitant. The tension from earlier hadn't faded. Everyone had just witnessed one of their own lay hands on a decorated serviceman, and now the courtroom felt more like a minefield. "Your Honor," said Marcus's defense attorney, a young guy named Ellis, "before we proceed, I'd like to formally request a dismissal. Not only was my client mischaracterized during the stop, but now we have reason to question the conduct of the very officer whose testimony this case relies on." The judge nodded slightly. "Understood." He glanced down at the file, then up at Officer Warren. "Officer, please approach the bench." Warren walked stiffly forward, his posture no longer defiant, more like cautious. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You put your hands on a courtroom guest," he said, just loud enough for the attorneys and nearby observers to hear. "That guest happens to be a Navy SEAL. A highly decorated one, I might add. Explain yourself." Warren's mouth opened, but no words came. The judge leaned in. "Let me be clear. You're not going to bluff your way out of this. You laid hands on a federal asset. That's not only inappropriate, it's illegal." Warren looked like he wanted to vanish. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened again. Two men in suits walked in. They weren't part of the court staff. They were federal investigators. And they walked straight toward the bench. The older one nodded to the judge, then turned to me. "Chief Barlow," he said calmly, flashing his badge. "We heard what happened. If you're willing, we'd like to take your statement once the hearing is over." I nodded. "Absolutely." The judge looked down at Warren again. "You'll remain after court for questioning. Do not leave." Warren didn't reply. He didn't have to. Because now he wasn't just under scrutiny. He was under investigation. Officer Warren slowly backed away from the bench and returned to his seat, but the swagger was gone. His shoulders slumped slightly. He avoided eye contact with everyone. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked back at the courtroom. "As for the matter at hand," he said, returning to Marcus's case, "given what's just occurred, I find it necessary to reevaluate this entire situation." Ellis, Marcus's attorney, seized the moment. "Your Honor, with respect, the officer who issued the citation is now under review for misconduct. This taints the legitimacy of the initial stop. We request that the citation be dropped in its entirety." The prosecutor, clearly rattled, glanced at her notes. Then she sighed. "No objection, Your Honor." The gavel came down. Case dismissed. A quiet cheer broke out in the gallery, muted, respectful, but real. Marcus looked stunned. He turned to me with a small smile, shaking his head like he couldn't believe what had just happened. But we weren't done. As the crowd began filing out of the courtroom, the two federal agents approached me again. "We've already flagged the courthouse security footage," the older one said. "Everything that happened, including the shove, was captured." "I figured," I replied calmly. The younger agent added, "We also pulled Officer Warren's internal affairs history. This isn't the first time he's overstepped." But now we've got something we can't ignore. Across the room, Warren sat motionless. He could hear everything. And he knew his time on the force might be ending. As I turned to leave with Marcus, the judge called out again. "Chief Barlow." I stopped and looked back. The judge stepped down from the bench and walked toward me. "On behalf of this court, and frankly, this country, thank you for your service. And for the restraint you showed today. You didn't have to handle it the way you did." I offered a respectful nod. I didn't want to escalate. But I wasn't going to let it slide, either. His face grew serious. "You didn't. And now, maybe something will finally change." We left the courtroom side by side, two brothers, one free of charges, the other quietly carrying the weight of more than just a badge. Outside the courthouse, the sun was already dipping low, casting long shadows across the marble steps. Reporters had started to gather, word had spread fast. But I wasn't there to give interviews. Marcus walked beside me, quiet at first, then he finally spoke. "I didn't know you still carried the badge," he said. I gave a short nod. "Only when I think it might matter." He looked over. It mattered today. We kept walking as the federal agents followed a few paces behind. They'd meet with courthouse staff, review body cam and surveillance footage, and follow up on Officer Warren's past complaints. From what they hinted, this wasn't going to disappear quietly. And it shouldn't. Before we reached the street, I turned back once and looked at the courthouse doors. That place had seen a lot of silence over the years, people afraid to speak up, afraid to challenge authority. But not today. Today, the script flipped. Warren would likely face disciplinary hearings, and from what I heard, he'd already been placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. An internal investigation was underway, but federal oversight meant it wouldn't be swept under the rug this time. As for Marcus, his name was cleared. He walked away not only exonerated, but with a new understanding of the power of presence. And me? I'd go back to base in a few days. Quietly. Without ceremony. That's the part most people don't understand. We don't fight for medals. We don't fight for recognition. We fight to protect people, even if the battlefield looks like a courtroom instead of a war zone. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand up. Silently. Until the truth forces everyone else to sit down. 3 weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name, typed clean, centered. Inside was a formal letter from the Office of Professional Accountability. It confirmed what I already suspected: Officer Warren had resigned. It wasn't just the courtroom incident. The investigators dug deeper. Found old reports that had been buried. Witnesses who had been intimidated. Patterns of behavior that finally caught up with him, once the right spotlight was turned on. The letter closed with an acknowledgement: "Your presence and restraint helped bring long-standing issues to light. We thank you for your integrity and service." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not out of pride, but out of principle. A few days after that, Marcus sent me a photo. It was the two of us on the courthouse steps, taken by someone in the crowd. I hadn't even noticed at the time. In the picture, I'm standing straight, badge in one hand. Marcus beside me, smiling with disbelief. He added a caption: "Not all heroes wear robes. Some show up quietly, then leave louder than anyone else in the room." I don't know what comes next for Officer Warren. But I know what comes next for us. We keep showing up. For what's right. For each other. Even when no one expects us to. Especially then. I didn't expect what came next. A week after Officer Warren's resignation hit the news, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail at first. When I finally listened, the voice was trembling but clear. "Chief Barlow, you don't know me, but I saw what happened in that courtroom. My name is Andrea Vega. I filed a complaint against that same officer 2 years ago. No one believed me. They said I was overreacting. I just wanted to say, thank you. It wasn't the only call. Messages poured in. Emails too. Quiet voices, people who had stayed silent for fear of backlash. Some were civilians. Some were even from within law enforcement, officers who had grown tired of protecting the wrong people. One message stuck with me: it wasn't just what you did, it was how you did it. Calm. Controlled. Unshakable. That gave the rest of us strength. I hadn't set out to start anything. I was there for one person, my brother. But sometimes showing up for one person sets off a chain reaction. Marcus was doing better now. He'd gotten a job offer to work with a local youth program, helping teens who'd had bad experiences with the system. He told them the truth, about how it felt to be misjudged, and how justice can win when someone stands beside you. As for me, I returned to base with a little more weight in my stride. Not from pride. From responsibility. The truth is, the uniform earns respect. But how you wear it, that's what really matters. And sometimes, standing up quietly in a crowded room echoes louder than any uniform ever could. Months passed. I didn't talk about the courtroom much. I went back to my usual life, training ops, mentoring new recruits, quiet missions that never made headlines. But the echoes of that day never really faded. One afternoon, I got pulled into a meeting on base. Nothing unusual, until I walked in and saw who was waiting. A senior Department of Defense liaison. She handed me a plaque. No cameras. No ceremony. Just a quiet nod and the words, "You reminded a lot of people what honor looks like. On the field. And off it." I thanked her, but I didn't hang the plaque. I kept it in a drawer, same as the letter. Because real change doesn't come from awards. It comes from impact. Back home, Marcus had started something small, but powerful. A community workshop that taught local youth how to handle tense encounters, know their rights, and even practice de-escalation skills. He called it, "Stand Still, Stand Strong." He invited me to speak once. I said no. But I showed up anyway, quietly, in the back. Just to watch. Just to see him lead. That's when I realized, it wasn't about me anymore. What happened in that courtroom? It wasn't the end of a story. It was the start of something better. Because every time someone stands when it's hard. Every time someone speaks calmly when others yell. Every time the truth shows up in silence, that's how legacies are built. Not by medals. Not by noise. But by actions that ripple long after the gavel falls. It was a rainy Thursday when I saw him again. I was just getting off duty, headed toward the base gate, when the guard stopped me. "Chief Barlow, someone's here asking for you." Civilian. That usually meant press, or trouble. I walked to the small visitor center, where a man in a soaked hoodie stood, shifting nervously on his feet. I almost didn't recognize him at first. Officer Warren. Except now, he looked different. Smaller somehow. No badge. No uniform. No bravado. He looked up and met my eyes. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't say anything. Just waited. He took a shaky breath. "I've been going to counseling. Mandatory at first. Now, voluntary." That day, in the courtroom, it broke something open. I stayed silent. "I lost everything I thought gave me power," he said. "And for a while, I hated you for it. But I've come to realize, you didn't break me. You showed me I was already broken. Still, I said nothing. I'm not here for forgiveness, he added quickly. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know. I'm trying to change. And part of that is facing what I did. The rain tapped harder against the windows. I looked at him for a long time. Finally spoke. Good. Then start by never letting it happen again. Not to anyone. He nodded. That was all. No handshake. No closure speech. He turned and left. But as I watched him walk away, I understood something important. Even the hardest stone can crack if struck right, and sometimes, growth seeps through those cracks. I wasn't looking for redemption from him. But if that day in court had lit a spark in even one person, then maybe, just maybe, it was all worth it. A year later, I was back in that same courtroom, not for a trial this time, but for something else entirely. Marcus had asked me to come. The city was recognizing a handful of community leaders who had made measurable impact in reducing conflict between law enforcement and civilians. He was one of them. So was someone else. The MC cleared her throat. And finally, we want to acknowledge a former officer who's taken accountability and now trains new recruits on de-escalation and ethics. Mr. Thomas Warren. There was a murmur in the crowd. Some whispered. Others stayed still. Warren stood from the back of the room. No uniform. Just a clean shirt and steady eyes. He didn't wave. Didn't smile. He walked forward quietly, accepted the certificate, and walked back. I watched from the gallery. Didn't clap. But I didn't walk out either. After the ceremony, Marcus found me outside. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said. Just, thinking how strange life is. We stood for a moment under the courthouse awning, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. You think people really change? He asked. I looked at him. They don't always, I replied. But sometimes, they do. When enough truth finds them. He nodded. You were that truth for him. For me, too. I didn't respond. I just gave him a short smile. Then we walked away, side by side, for the second time. No headlines. No cameras. No badges on display. Just two brothers who stood up, one in court, one in the community, and watched the ripple become something real. Not a story about power. But about presence. And how showing up changes everything. 3 months later, I received a letter, handwritten, formal but personal. It was from a newly appointed police academy director in another state. Chief Barlow, I've recently integrated your courtroom testimony and the events surrounding it into our ethics training module. The cadets watch, they discuss, and they ask questions. But the one thing they keep circling back to, is your silence. You didn't shout. You didn't retaliate. You didn't posture. You stood. And somehow, that shook the room more than anything else. Thank you. For giving us something real to teach. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the others, beside the plaque, beside the agency's commendation, beside the photo Marcus took from the courthouse steps. That drawer wasn't a trophy case. It was a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the most impactful stories aren't the ones shouted the loudest, but the ones that carry quiet honor. Where others raised fists, I raised my presence. Where others leaned on rank, I leaned on truth. And where injustice expected silence, I let stillness speak louder. Because long after the courtroom emptied, long after the headlines faded, and long after the badges came off, the weight of what we stand for, still echoes. 2 years passed. Life settled into something steady. No more headlines. No more investigations. Just days filled with training, mentoring, and quiet work behind the scenes. Then one evening, I was invited to speak at a graduation ceremony, not military, not law enforcement. A youth leadership program. The same one Marcus helped build from scratch. I almost said no. I preferred to stay behind the curtain. But Marcus looked at me with that same determined face he had the day we walked out of court. They need to see what calm strength looks like, he said. Not just hear about it. So I showed up. No uniform. No fanfare. Just me. I talked about presence. About not needing to yell to be heard. About restraint being a sign of power, not weakness. And about how your reputation is what people say when you're not in the room, but your legacy is what they carry when you're long gone. Afterward, one of the students, a young girl, maybe 17, walked up and asked me a simple question: were you scared in that courtroom? I paused. Yes, I said. But fear doesn't decide how you act. You do. She nodded slowly. Then she smiled. That was it. No awards. No thunderous applause. Just a quiet moment where something real passed from one person to another. And that's how legacies live. Not in statues. Not in medals. But in moments. In choices. And in calm, deliberate stands that remind people who they are, and what they still can become. Because the strongest force in any room is the one that never needed to raise its voice to be heard.